Krystal Everdeen, and today I'm going to show you how to crochet this adorable heart halter top just in time for Valentine's Day. And this design is actually a remake of one that I did a couple years ago, but that one was a little bit tricky and I wasn't really happy with it, but this time I think I perfected it. So yeah, it is a little bit challenging, I must admit, but it comes out really awesome in the end. So let's get started. For this project, I'm using size 4 yarn from the brand Impeccable, or rather the brand Loops and Threads, but the Impeccable series, as well as a size 5mm hook. The first thing that I did was create a slip knot, and then I chained a chain that was long enough to cover from one side of my ribs to the other. And what I mean by that is I chained a chain that was long enough to cover from here to here. And once I completed chaining that chain, I went back on it using a single crochet. Now, as a quick recap, a single crochet consists of putting your hook through the stitch, yarning over, bringing it back through the stitch, yarning over again, and then bringing it through the last 2 loops. So through the stitch, yarn over, back through the stitch, yarn over through the last 2 loops. Now, if you are a beginner to crochet or need a refresher, I do have a Crocheting for Beginners video that I will link in the description box below, so you can go check that out and practice the stitches for a bit until you master them, and then once you do, you can either try out some more beginner-friendly videos, or you can come back to this one and try it out. But I must say it is a little bit challenging, but yeah, it's totally up to you. Okay, so on with the rest of the tutorial. Basically, I'm going to make my first row of single crochet. So once I reach the end of the row, my first row should look something like this. And now I'm at the end, and I'm going to go into my last 2 stitches. And I'm going to make sure that I go into the very, very last stitch because I don't want my project to be all uneven. And then I'm going to chain 1, flip the project over, and then make my first single crochet inside of that very first stitch along with the rest of the row. Make sure that you do not skip any stitches and just continue making single crochets on top of the previous row of single crochets, and it should look something like this. And always make sure that you chain 1 at the end of each row because you want it to again stay even. And yeah, so just continue on and make your second row of single crochet, and once you're done, it should look something like this. And now I'm at the end, my last 2 stitches, and make sure that I go into the very last one. And once I do, make my last single crochet, then I chain 1, flip it over, and then make my 3rd row of single crochet. Now always remember to chain 1 at the end of each row, and also go into every single stitch, including the very, very first stitch. Do not skip that first stitch, otherwise your top is going to start to pull inward. So if you're wondering what exactly is this part that we're making right now, this is the part that is going to cover from below your breasts. So if you want this to be a full blouse, then you want to make many rows of this. If you want it to be a crop top like mine, then only make a couple rows like I did. So this is going to be, again, the part that covers pretty much your stomach, and then once we start actually making the halter shape, like triangular shape, that's the part that's going to wrap around your chest. So once you're ready to start working on the chest portion of the project, then we're going to switch it up just a tiny bit. So at the very end, you're going to go into all of your stitches like normal. You're also going to chain 1 like normal. You're going to flip it over like normal. And you're going to go into the first stitch like normal. But now instead of going into the second stitch, you're going to skip it and go into that 3rd stitch. And that's the only difference. And you really can't tell a difference at first because it's so subtle, but eventually once you keep doing this, you're going to see that there's a slant at the edges, and that's exactly what you want because you want this to be a halter top and not just a giant square on your body. Okay, so like I said, everything's going to pretty much be the same except you're going to skip that 2nd stitch on every row. And after a couple rows, you're going to see that your top is starting to look like this, which is pretty much just a giant triangle. So from here on is when I started skipping that stitch, and you could totally tell It did kind of pull even the square portion that I made, so it just looks like a giant triangle, but it's fine for me. I like the way that it looks. So I'm just going to keep on going until I put the project against my chest and I want the heart to begin. Does that make sense? Like, you put the project against yourself and you figure, yep, this is where I want the heart to start forming. And it's going to be forming from the bottom, obviously. So it's going to be a halter top, and then the heart's going to be right here. So this is going to be the point of the heart. So now you're going to work on one side only, just one side. We're going to work on one part of the heart, and then after we're done with that, then we'll do the exact same thing on the other side. But for now, let's not worry about the other side. We're just going to focus on one side. So once you have decided that you want to start making the heart, then you're basically going to do the exact same thing that you've been doing. Every time you reach the side, you're going to chain one, go into the first stitch, and then skip over the second stitch, go right into the third stitch with single crochet. Now what I'm doing is going towards the middle stitch. You have to determine which one is the middle stitch. You can either count your stitches or do what I do and fold the project in half and then just look at which stitch is the middle stitch. I know it's totally unorthodox, but that's just the way I roll. Okay, so once you worked your way to the middle stitch, you're going to flip the project over. Do not chain one, go into the first stitch and then skip over that second stitch and go right into the third stitch. And that's going to immediately start to pull, and that's exactly what you want because you want to immediately start forming the heart shape, and you do not want it too square or too round. So always make sure that you do not chain one when you're coming from the middle, but always chain one when you're coming from the side. So once you're working on the side like I am right now, you always make sure to chain one before you start the new row. And you're going to do the exact same thing for the rest of the project. Every time you reach the exterior side, you're always going to chain one. And every time you reach the middle, you're never going to chain one. So my next row, do not chain one. Go into that first stitch, skip over that second stitch, go into the third stitch, and there's an extreme pull right here, and that's exactly what you want because you want this heart to have a pointed bottom. You do not want it to be round. I did actually make another Valentine's Day heart top a couple years ago, and my heart came out really wonky and round, so I made sure not to do that this time. Heh. So this is definitely a much better version of my earlier design. So yeah. Okay, so when you're making this portion of the project, you need to keep in mind the shape of the heart you want to make. Always picture that in your mind and work towards forming it in reality. So in my mind, I'm always outlining the heart and maybe even tracing it out with my hand to make sure that I'm on the right track so it doesn't come out all weird again. So I've made enough rows to satisfy the actual curve of the heart. So now I'm going to change it up a bit for a couple of rows. I'm basically going to not skip any stitches coming back from the middle stitch. And what I mean by that is now I'm going to go into all of the stitches, the very end. I always struggle at the very end here. So I go into the very last stitch and make my last single crochet, flip the project over, and I would normally not chain one. I'm still not going to chain one, and then I would skip one, but now I'm not going to skip any at all for the next 2 rows. I'm just going to make 2 rows of this just to make a couple of evened out rows so it's not always decreasing. The only side that's always going to be decreasing is the exterior. Like I said before, from then on it was always going to be the same thing. When every time you reach the exterior, it was chain one, flip the project over, go into the first stitch, and then skip over that second stitch always. So it's a constant slope, constantly making that halter top shape. So now you can see that because I did that, there's a slight curve and it's starting to look more like a heart. And we didn't even have to do anything fancy like start increasing or anything. Nope, all we had to do was stop skipping that stitch every time you reach the middle stitch. So yeah, just make a couple rows of this until you're satisfied with the curve. I was happy with the curve like this because I knew that I was going to start making more for the next step, and then I'm going to make that inside point later on. But first I needed to finish off this portion, and once you're done making that little curve, then you detach the yarn from the yarn ball and then reattach it to the other side, and you're basically going to do the exact same thing that you did for the first side but on the opposite side. So again, starting from the end, you're still going to chain 1, skip over the second stitch, and then make your way towards the middle stitch all the way over here. And then you're just going to work on this side only, eventually connecting the two together, but for now let's just worry about this one side now. So you're going to go into the same middle stitch as you did before. So you guys are going to basically share a stitch both sides, and you're going to do the same thing. You're not going to chain 1, and then you're going to skip over the second stitch. And this is going to be the point of the heart, and I know it looks dumb right now, but we're going to fix it later. It does bother me. But again, we're going to fix it later, and it's not even hard. I thought it was going to be hard at first when I was working on this. I'm like, oh man, how am I going to fix this? I'm going to have to get a needle and thread. I'm going to have to sew it, but it's super easy, and I'll show you in a bit. But right now we're focusing on the other side, which again is easy because you already know what to do. You do the exact same thing that you did on the opposite side. And I would suggest that you keep checking periodically that both sides are symmetrical. If you counted your stitches, then good for you, because everything is going to be so much easier. But if you're like me and you always eyeball it, then you always have to just double check that everything looks good and everything is the same. So it should look something like this. Once you are done and both sides are even, now all we have to do is connect the two sides, and in order to do that, don't worry, it's super easy. You start from the side that you were already working on, and again, you're always going to do the same thing. You're going to chain 1, go into the first one, skip over the second one, and then continue on to your row. And once you reach the middle stitch, we're going to make our way over to the other side by simply creating a chain. Just going to make a chain, reach on over. Now, I would suggest that you make the chain long enough so that it easily reaches the other side. You do not want it too short and have it pull, yet you don't want it too long and have it too loose, because then that'll look weird. You have to have it so that it barely touches the other side without you having to pull it or without too much slack. So if you're wondering, it took me 12 chains to make it over to this side and look fantastic. And I think 12 is the magic number for my size. But of course, you're probably a different size than me, so it may take less or more depending again on your size. So once you have attached the chain to the other side, then your top should look something like this. And now you could totally see where the heart's going to be, right? I mean, right now it's just a triangle, but again, we're going to make the actual heart shape later on. Right now we need to focus on working on the actual top. Now, I didn't want the heart to be formed like right at my neck when I wear the top, so I decided to make a couple rows of cushion, and so I just made probably 5 rows of single crochet. Again, I never count my stitches or my rows, so I know that's not the way that most crocheters do it, but that's just the way I do it because I'm self-taught and I never looked up any proper tutorials or read any books. I just figure everything out myself, and my brain just works better that way. But anyway, so just make a couple of rows. When you reach the chain in the middle, just go through it with single crochet as normal, and it's going to look great, no worries. And again, every time you reach the exterior of the top, you're going to chain 1, flip it over, go into the first stitch, skip over the second stitch, go into the third stitch, and then complete the row. So again, I only made a couple of extra rows on top of the heart or the triangle that we made, and it looks something like this. And now, since I'm here, I'm going to make the straps, single crochet my way across, make the other strap, and yeah. In order to make the strap, I start off from where I want this strap to start, which is the end of the row. And I simply chain a chain of about 55 to 58 chains. I don't know, those are just the perfect numbers for me for my neck straps. And then once I'm done with the chain, I go back on that chain with a slip stitch in order to make the chain thicker, because I realized that if you just use the chain itself, it actually like digs into your neck because it's thin, but with this extra layer of a slip stitch, it's slightly thicker and doesn't hurt nearly as much. I mean, actually it doesn't even hurt unless you tie it like super tight. Yeah, so I like doing that, and then also I don't have to detach the yarn from the yarn ball all the time. I just go down to where the top is and then single crochet my way over to the other side and make the other strap. And then once I'm done with the second strap, then I detach the yarn from the yarn ball then, and either cut it with scissors, but clearly I don't have scissors, that's why I just ripped the yarn from the yarn ball, and just cut the excess yarn. So yeah, I'm pretty much done with most of the top. I just need the back straps and the little heart design. I mean, this could be a design as well, like a triangle opening. If you like it, then you're done, woohoo! But this is a heart top tutorial, so we're gonna do the heart. And I paused here because I was trying to figure out how the heck I'm going to do this. I was making everything up pretty much as I went along, so that's why I was like, what am I doing? But basically what I figured out is you need to attach the yarn not to any of the sides and not exactly in the middle, but off center, if that makes sense. You can see where I attached the yarn, right? Okay, say you have 12 stitches in between one side of the heart to the other side, right? Well, you want to attach the yarn to numbers 5, 6, 7, and 8 out of those 12 stitches, so that there's 4 stitches on one side and 4 stitches on the other side, and then your single crochets that you just made in the middle right now. Hopefully that diagram helped you out because I have no idea how else to explain it. So once you have attached your yarn to the center, you make 4 single crochets there, and then for my first row I chained 1 and went into every single stitch with a single crochet, and then for the third row I decided that we need to start making the triangular shape now. So I did not chain 1. I went into all of the stitches, and at the end of that row I flipped it over, did not chain 1, went into the first stitch, skipped the middle stitch and just went straight into the last stitch. And then for the final row it was to make the point, so all I did was go into that middle stitch, and there you go, I had a point for my heart. And that's how you make the actual heart shape. Woohoo! Now, yes, it does look a little wonky, and of course we need to fix that stupid thing at the bottom that bothered me the entire time I made this project. But anyway, what I'm going to do is single crochet my way all around the outline of the heart. And once I reach that point at the heart, I'm going to fix it, and I'm going to happily show you how you can fix it too if you have the same problem that I did. I don't know how it formed, but if you come across the same issue, I understand. I feel you. But anyway, so starting from where I left off, I'm just going to stick my hook wherever it fits. It's going to be a little bit difficult because there's no actual stitches that are dedicated for you to continue making stitches on top of. You're just going to have to free ball it. You're just going to have to stick your hook in wherever it fits and then create single crochets all along the outline of the heart, and make sure that your stitches are rather close to each other because you don't want to mess up the heart shape by making it pull. Okay, now we're gonna finally fix this thing right here. All I had to do was go to the stitch under that stitch, slip stitch it, and then continue making my single crochets. And that was it. I fixed it. Woohoo! Now that thing is gone and I have a beautifully pointed heart. Super duper easy. I was so happy that I was able to figure out how to fix this issue. I thought I was going to have to come back with a needle and thread and like sew it, and I was like, man, it's gonna look weird. But all I had to do was go into the stitch right below it, slip stitch, and it closed it up. Perfect. So I went around the entire outline of the heart, and now I am back at the tip of the heart. I'm just going to detach the yarn from the yarn ball. Again, I do not have scissors on hand, so I just ripped it off, and then seal it off. That's it. I would cut off the excess yarn, but don't have the scissors out right now, so I'm just going to hide it for now and then cut it off later. And voila! You're almost done with the heart top, but you made the most important and challenging part already, so good job! Woohoo! Now all you have to figure out is which side is going to be the back side of your top, and then you're going to attach the yarn to both the sides of the bottom of the top. Yeah. And then you're going to chain very long chains. Mine are about 150 chains long because I want to make this crisscross design. And in order for me to do that, these straps need to be really long. So normally I make about 120 to 150 depending on the type of top. I believe this one was 150. I honestly do not remember. Holy cow, what's wrong with me? But after I was done chaining those chains and I made my 2 straps, then I proceeded with this crisscross design, which is really easy. You just grab one strap, bring it over to the opposite side and attach it to that side, and then bring it over again to the original side and then attach it again, and then you do the exact same thing on the opposite side, but obviously opposite. So you grab it from one side, take it to the opposite side, and then back to the original side. And then voila, you are done with your top, and you can rock it on Valentine's Day or on any day because this is a gorgeous top and you did a wonderful job, and be proud of it. Own it. You're fabulous and wonderful. Woohoo! I hope you enjoyed this tutorial, and if you did, please give this video a thumbs up. And also, I just want to sincerely ask you that if you do use this design either for personal use or even for your shop, if you would just please give me design credit and maybe link back to this tutorial or tag me in your photos. I would genuinely appreciate it. Lately, I've been hit with a lot of people taking my designs and claiming them as their own, and it really hurts me. So this Valentine's Day, if you can help spread the love of crochet and maybe even help me out a little bit by just giving some credit, I would appreciate it. Thank you so much for all of your support. Happy crocheting, and don't forget to click that red subscribe button if you have not already, so I can see you next time. Bye!